1 week after September 11th, with the nation already in mourning, another wave of terror began, silent, invisible, and just as deadly. Letters laced with powdered anthrax were mailed to media outlets and U.S. senators. Within weeks, 5 people were dead and 17 others infected. America was facing its deadliest biological attack, and the source wasn't a foreign adversary. It was someone within. In the shadow of September 11th, America was shaken again. The anthrax letters, mailed in 2 waves in September and October 2001, were precise, deadly, and psychologically devastating. They targeted journalists and politicians, disrupting the very institutions meant to uphold democracy and free speech. In this documentary, we retrace the timeline of events, explore the human toll, and examine the long and controversial investigation that followed, one that ended in tragedy and left behind more questions than answers. The first set of anthrax-laced letters were postmarked September 18, 2001, from Trenton, New Jersey. They were sent to media companies including ABC, NBC, CBS, The New York Post, and American Media Incorporated in Florida. The second wave, sent in October, was far more dangerous. These were mailed to Senators Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy, key Democratic lawmakers. The notes inside were short and chilling, containing phrases like, "Death to America," "Death to Israel," "Allah is great." The powder within was not just anthrax, it was refined, weaponized. The FBI would later describe it as highly purified and concentrated to a level suggesting laboratory sophistication. The first victim was 63-year-old photo editor Robert Stevens of the Sun tabloid in Florida. He died on October 5th from inhalation anthrax. Soon after, postal workers Joseph Cursine and Thomas Morris Jr. died in Washington, D.C. They had unknowingly handled contaminated mail. Others fell ill across the country, including a New York City hospital worker and 94-year-old Ottilie Lundgren in Connecticut, who likely contracted anthrax from cross-contaminated mail. Inhalation anthrax, the most deadly form, begins with flu-like symptoms and progresses rapidly to severe respiratory failure. The U.S. public health system was not prepared. Hospitals scrambled. Antibiotics were distributed en masse. Fear of mail turned national. The FBI's case, codenamed Amerithrax, became one of the most complex investigations in Bureau history. Forensic scientists traced the anthrax to a single strain known as Ames, stored in U.S. biodefense labs. Initial suspicion fell on Dr. Stephen Hatfill, a former Army virologist. He had once worked at United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, had published papers on biological warfare, and had access to BSL-3 labs. When agents found he'd been in the D.C. area around the time of the mailings and failed a polygraph, they ramped up pressure. Hatfill was publicly named a person of interest. His home was searched, his reputation ruined. But there was no evidence linking him to the attacks. Years later, the government cleared him and paid a $4.6 million settlement for the damage they had caused. The FBI turned next to Dr. Bruce Ivins, a senior biodefense researcher at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases. He had direct access to a flask labeled RMR-1029, the presumed source of the spores. Ivins was a brilliant but troubled scientist. He had a history of mental health issues, and co-workers described erratic behavior. During the critical weeks the letters were sent, he worked alone in the lab late at night. As the investigation closed in, Ivins came under surveillance. In July 2008, just before he was to be charged, he died by suicide. He left no confession. The FBI declared the case closed, naming him the sole perpetrator. But without trial or direct evidence, many questioned whether justice had truly been served. Experts from the National Academy of Sciences reviewed the FBI's scientific evidence and found it inconclusive. The spores from Ivins' lab could have been shared, and timelines didn't perfectly match. Friends and colleagues insisted he lacked the motive and means. The case rested on circumstantial behavior and psychological profiling, not forensic proof. In 2015, the Government Accountability Office issued a report echoing doubts about the FBI's conclusions. Some believe the real perpetrator may never have been found. The anthrax attacks permanently changed how the U.S. responds to biological threats. Biosecurity funding surged. Mailrooms in government and media buildings were overhauled with radiation scanners and chemical detectors. The Department of Homeland Security was created in part to address bioterrorism. The CDC expanded its emergency response capabilities, but fear and distrust also grew. Fear of invisible weapons and distrust in institutions meant to protect the public. More than 20 years later, the anthrax case remains a dark mystery. Was Bruce Ivins truly guilty? Did someone else evade justice? And could it happen again? In a world of evolving threats, the anthrax letters remind us that terror doesn't always arrive with a bang. It can arrive in your mailbox. If you found this story powerful, please like, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts below. There are still many untold stories. This is just one. Thank you for watching.